You, but your car, your house, or your money. As we first reported last April, it started as a simple idea. Strip the drug barons of their ill-gotten gains, take their most precious possessions, their fat bank accounts, their yachts, their sports cars and mansions, then use the proceeds to help pay the cost of the war on drugs. Sound like a good idea? Well, Congress thought so back in 1984 when it changed the federal forfeiture law. But if someone were to tell you that thanks to that change, a law enforcement officer can seize your property, your car, your money, without charging you with anything, without arresting you, without ever convicting you of a crime, you'd probably say that's not possible, not in America. Well, just ask Willie Jones. Willie Jones runs a small landscaping business in Nashville, Tennessee. Once or twice a year, he goes out of state to buy shrubbery. A year ago, Jones walked into the airport here in Nashville and paid cash for a round-trip ticket to Houston, Texas. A few minutes later, 2 Nashville police officers stopped, questioned, and with Willie Jones's permission, searched him. They found $9,000 in his money belt, money that Jones said was to buy the shrubbery. He told the police officers he got a better deal when he paid in cash. The policemen didn't believe him. They suspected that Willie Jones was really a drug courier, and using the federal forfeiture law, they seized the $9,000. It was the last Willie Jones ever saw of his money, even though he's never been charged with a crime, and there's no indication he ever will be. His money is gone, forfeited to the United States government.
$9,000 is a lot of money to me. I've got a family, and I need this money to support my family and my nursery business.
The police say you're suspicious. You couldn't tell them where you were going or what nursery you were going to, who you were going to do business with?
I did not tell them. I didn't feel that it was none of their business. I had not committed a crime. I had not did anything wrong.
But you're not a drug dealer?
I'm not a drug dealer.
When they seized his money, Jones thought they were going to arrest him.
But they didn't?
No. They told me that I had not committed a crime, that they didn't have anything to arrest me for.
The way the forfeiture law works, the police officers didn't have to arrest Willie Jones, or for that matter, prove that he was a drug courier. In effect, what they did was arrest his money. And under the forfeiture law, all they needed was probable cause to believe that the money was somehow drug-related. In this case, probable cause meant the following. Willie Jones was carrying a large amount of cash. He was traveling to Houston, according to the federal government, a source city for drugs. His ticket said he was only going to be on the ground an hour, although Jones was carrying an overnight bag and insists it was a ticketing mistake. Finally, Willie Jones couldn't or wouldn't answer their questions. Bo Edwards is a Nashville attorney who's taken on Willie Jones's case. He's also the head of a task force for the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers that's investigating the forfeiture law.
How do you think these 2 law enforcement agents knew that Willie was carrying that money?
Oh, I know how they knew. The ticket agent for the airline that sold Willie the ticket called them. Drug interdiction units at airports all over the country pay rewards to airport and airline employees for giving them tips when they think someone might be carrying large sums of money or cash or drugs. It's done every day.
We wanted to try and find out for ourselves how easy it is for something like this to happen. And here at the Nashville airport, it took us less than 30 minutes. We had 60 Minutes producer Harry Radliff purchase a round-trip ticket from Nashville to Houston with a quick turnaround. And just like Willie Jones, he paid cash. Less than 15 minutes later, he was approached by 2 Nashville police officers.
Howdy. How are you?
They asked Radliff to identify himself, asked where he was going, why, and would he mind going with them and answering a few questions.
What I'd like to ask you, are you carrying any drugs on your person?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Do you have anything in your bag?
No.
Do you have any large sums of currency?
Depends on what you define as large sums of currency.
Well, to me, I would say anything over $1,000.
Yes.
When Radliff told them he was with 60 Minutes, the officers backed off. They're the same 2 officers who stopped Willie Jones, only he wasn't so fortunate. They took his $9,000.
How can they do that?
The DEA is given so much authority, so much power under the forfeiture law. They have been able to get away with it so far.
Aren't they obligated at some point to come back and charge him or try and prove that that was drug money?
No. How can they charge him with committing a crime? Willie Jones was a peaceful, law-abiding citizen who had $9,000 taken off of him by a man with a badge.
If you think what happened to Willie Jones is some sort of a fluke, it isn't. According to a 10-month investigation by the Pittsburgh Press, the majority of seizures under the forfeiture law are made without arresting anyone, without ever charging anyone with a crime. But Judge Robert Bonner, the administrator of the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, defends the law and says Willie Jones's money was a good bust.
If you have 60 minutes and you land at the Houston airport, and that's all the time you have there, you're not there to buy bushes and shrubs. The only thing you have time to buy is a drug deal that's already been set up.
You think he's involved in drugs? Prove it.
I think you know there's a difference between the civil asset forfeiture laws that permit us to, if there is probable cause, reasonable grounds to believe that that money was used or intended to be used for drug trafficking, to seize the money.
For me, it's a big jump from that point to the fact that he was down there to buy drugs.
Well, you're not a trained narcotics officer, for one thing, Steve.
You said it allows you to deprive the drug trafficker. In the case of Willie Jones, where's the drug trafficker?
I've described the various factors that would lead, I think, a reasonable and objective person to conclude that the money was drug money.
I'm a reasonable person, and I'm not convinced.
He was given notice. He could have filed a claim, which would have required the government to go forward and put that proof on in a federal district court before a federal judge or jury if Mr. Jones wanted a jury trial on it.
That's exactly what Willie Jones wanted, his day in court. But in forfeiture cases, it's not that simple. First, you've got to post a bond, 10% of the value of the property seized. In the case of Willie Jones, $900, money he didn't have. Jones asked the DEA to waive the bond. The DEA refused. So Willie Jones never even got his day in court. But if he had, he would have discovered that unlike criminal cases where the government has to prove you're guilty, in forfeiture cases, you have to prove you're innocent. I think all of us grow up thinking that you're innocent in this country until you're proven guilty.
The problem in forfeiture law is that doesn't apply. If the government takes your property and you get your day in court, you must prove to the government and the court that the property was not involved in a drug transaction and that you didn't intend for it to be involved in a drug transaction. The Bill of Rights applies to criminal cases. For example, the right to have a lawyer, the right to a trial by jury, that the government must prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. None of those rights apply in a civil case where the government is bringing a civil forfeiture proceeding against your property.
Why has it been made so difficult?
Or to make it easier for the government to keep the property. If we engaged in a contest, you furnish the property, I make the rules. Am I likely to make the rules easier for you to get your property back? I don't think so.
Billy Munnerlyn knows it's not easy or cheap. The processes left him bankrupt. It's the reason this Las Vegas pilot now makes his living driving a truck. Until October 1989, Munnerlyn ran a successful air charter business. That's when he flew this man, Albert Wright, from Little Rock, Arkansas to Ontario, California.
He looked like a banker and he talked like a banker.
Didn't look like a drug dealer.
No, sir. Absolutely not.
It turned out that Albert Wright is really a convicted criminal. When the charter landed at the Ontario airport, DEA agents were waiting. Wright's baggage, 4 padlocked boxes, were discovered to contain $2.7 million, cash, drug money. Wright and Munnerlyn were both arrested, but the charges against Munnerlyn were dropped for lack of evidence. He thought the whole thing was over until he found out the government had seized his plane.
As I understand it, they said they were arresting the airplane for hauling money. Something I don't understand today.
They were arresting the airplane?
Yes, sir. And that's what the paperwork said. The United States versus 11969 Gates Learjet, which is strange to me. They claimed the aircraft broke a law.
If in the eyes of the law you're an innocent man, one would think your airplane is innocent too.
Exactly.
The legal fiction that applies is that the property has committed a crime. And because it's property, the property has no legal rights.
For 2 years, Munnerlyn's Learjet has been in custody, sitting in a government warehouse while he spent $85,000 in legal fees trying to get it back. And what about his passenger, Albert Wright, the guy who got Munnerlyn into this mess in the first place? Well, the government decided not to prosecute him. When Munnerlyn's case finally did get to court a year ago, a jury in Los Angeles ruled in his favor, but the judge overruled the verdict and ordered another trial. The process has left Munnerlyn broke and bitter.
What's happened to you since that plane was taken?
I've lost the business. I've lost my certificate. I filed bankruptcy. And we virtually are penniless.
These aren't isolated cases. Every Wednesday in USA Today, the government publishes a new list of seizures. Everything from a few $100s to millions. From a 1967 Dodge Coronet to season tickets for the Utah Jazz. The government says 80% of the seizures go uncontested. Proof, it says, the law must be working.
That's what they say. What they don't say is how many of those cases are people unable to challenge to try to get their money back because they can't afford a lawyer, because they can't afford the bond, because the procedure for making a claim is so complicated and so far removed.
We've had a lot of people say, look, this is just an end run by the Justice Department to get around the Bill of Rights, to convict somebody or punish somebody that they think is involved in criminal activities, but they can't prove it.
Well, not at all. The Supreme Court of the United States has upheld the constitutionality. It said that the asset forfeiture law and the procedures it provides do not violate the Bill of Rights. It's been challenged before.
And so the forfeiture program continues to collect property, the planes and boats, the cars, the ill-gotten gains of the drug trade. Some of it, in a form of poetic justice, ends up being used by law enforcement against the drug dealers in their never-ending war. But the lion's share of the property is auctioned off. The federal government shares the proceeds with local police departments who help make the seizures in the first place. That's made the forfeiture law one of the most successful weapons in the war on drugs. Last year, police departments all over the country collected more than $600 million from the program.
It's like King John paying the sheriff of Nottingham and his men a bounty for the property they take from the citizens. It works exactly the same way.
Do you think it influences, or do you think it has an impact on the number of seizures?
Of course it does. Of course it does.
By the way, the government agreed to let Billy Munnerlyn have his plane back, but there's a catch. He has to buy it back. Munnerlyn agreed to pay the government $7,000, but he hasn't got the money right now, so the plane is still sitting in El Paso, Texas. Munnerlyn, who's still driving a truck, is deeply in debt and is filed for bankruptcy. As for Willie Jones, he may finally get his day in court. A federal judge in Nashville has ordered a hearing in his case. And in Washington, the House Government Affairs Operations Committee is scheduled hearings for late September.